Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
Well, it really is the baseline for everything that controls us, moves us forward, our emotions, our feelings. But are you really feeling those feelings? Really getting deep inside and experiencing what exactly is going on with your feelings? Because it really does pilot us. We're going to talk about that today. She is an amazing psychologist, hypnotherapist, author, speaker. She's back with us today. Ann Creekmore is on our program. And welcome back. How are you?
Good. How are you, Steve?
I guess I should have said, how are you feeling?
Feeling good. How are you feeling?
I'm actually feeling fantastic. Long story short, I had some shoulder pain. I don't know what it was from, maybe activities over the weekend. Got a massage yesterday, worked it all out. Feel fantastic, literally fantastic today.
That's wonderful. And it's always good to talk about the good things too. It makes them grow.
Well, you know what? That is I think, a great starting point, because when you ask somebody, and just in general, hey, how's it going? How you been? A lot of people gravitate toward, oh, hey, I can't believe I'm having a job. And my kids are this is that. And a lot of times we focus on the negative. And I am a firm believer in, we're just programmed to talk negative since birth.
That's true. It's
Yeah.
true. Yes, we are negative thinkers, and we really have to work on changing our thoughts to be positive, because our thoughts do outpicture in our lives. So that's a good point.
Why does it start negative? My theory first, you tell me if this is right or off base, but from childhood, I mean, young childhood, even to the point where you're 2 years old and you walk up to the kitchen table and you're finally walking, and then you reach over and you're like, oh, salt shaker, let me grab that. And then your parents say, Bob, no, 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 put that down, put that down. You're exposed to negativity right there. You're just exploring. You don't know any difference, but they're, they don't want to spill a salt all over the table. And, negative stuff like that, I believe, starts the path of negative thinking within our subconscious. And then that kind of pilots us along the way. Does that sound reasonable?
It does. It does. You should be a psychologist, Steve. Thank you.
People say I should be a therapist, but I don't know about that.
Yes. Yes. I mean, our negative thoughts do start, originate with our families. And it would be so important if parents, people get a driver's license and you have to go through all this training and testing, and parents never get that opportunity. Just, so it would be great if parents could have that training to realize how important what they say or to their children, how much it does affect their self-esteem and then their outlook on life. We just don't think about it. We're just jabbering, we're talking, and it does really have an impact. And people carry these limiting beliefs about themselves if it's repeated enough by their parents, because they love their parents, they look up to them, and they depend on them. I mean, for their safety, for their survival, and they want their parents to approve of them. And then if this negativity is said, then it really does affect them.
Yeah. And I want to add, I wish, and I think many who have figured this all out wish that we parented our kids differently based on what you just said, but we don't know any better. And I wish this was
should be
taught.
One course.
Absolutely. I believe everybody should have hypnotherapy. Everybody should take a course in parenting about all this stuff, because we're just doing the best we can with what we have or had. And what is that? Our parents. So
Exactly.
and then their parents and their parents. So it's a generational thing that goes on there.
Exactly. It just keeps getting passed on. And a lot of it is unconscious too. Like we have painful feelings and we have defense mechanisms, emotional defense mechanisms, so that we don't have to feel that pain. And we don't even really know, unless we do go into therapy, what it is that we're really feeling, because we've defended against it. And so, like you said, it's really a good thing to go and do self-discovery and therapy for everybody. I had a client that came, he was from Germany. When he came over, he started therapy, and he said he didn't feel bad about coming to therapy because everybody in Germany had a family physician, but everybody in America had a psychologist or a therapist, the way he saw it. So he said he didn't feel bad about it, So I think it is really good that people are realizing how important the self-discovery is and healing yourself is, and that there's no stigma to it. It's just should be part of life.
I'm so glad that things have changed. If you went back, let's say even 20 years, not that far, 20 years back, and said, I got to work on my mental health, people would be like, whoa, okay, something's up there. Those 2 words, mental health. And even to say, yeah, I'm in therapy. Now it's common. It's great. Everybody, it's almost like a badge of courage.
Exactly. Right. It's just becoming common sense to do it. Just like you're going to your family physician,
Yeah.
You got mind, body, spirit, and this is helping you with your mind, your emotions, your soul, So yeah.
Well, let's talk about more of feeling your feelings. When we say that phrase, what exactly are we meaning?
Well, that's a good question. In my book, Love Yourself, Love Your Life, which is in my maiden name, A.P. Filosa, F as in Frank, I, L as in Lou, O, S as in Sam, A, just so people know where to look for it. My second chapter, it's a summary of all the different major schools of thought in therapy and in the helping professions in psychology. And second chapter deals with feel your feelings. Last week, we kind of talked about your thoughts and how your thoughts create your outcomes in life, because the thoughts cause you to feel a certain way, what you say to yourself. If you say you're bad, you're going to act a certain way and behave a certain way, and then it's going to come out negatively. So your feelings can add a lot to what you do and how the outcomes are. Feeling your feelings is in the book. There's I even have it as like a handout too. What I like to use is this model by Eugene Gendlin. It's Gendlin. He had a book called Focusing Inward. And it actually became a movement where people could partner with each other and do this little kind of exercise to help a person feel their feelings. And what is meant by that is how you take a negative feeling, like you brought up at the beginning, start with a negative feeling, and how do you create a positive solution? How do you get from that negative feeling? Not to be afraid of it, not to defend against it, not to have to project it out, blame somebody else for something, or denial of the feeling, or other defense mechanisms that we all use, or act it out to get away from it, or just, different things. We want to feel the feeling. And this is a process that I have a handout. You can even put it on your phone or whatever, fridge or whatever, kind of with the steps. That's what I like to do in my book for the different therapies, have a kind of a step-by-step little summary of it. But what he did was he has a book called Focusing, which is a really good little paperback book. I'd recommend it if you want to learn more about it. But you basically ask yourself, what the first step, we just say, well, like say you feel overwhelmed, and it's kind of like this process helps you take the straw off the camel's back. You've heard of that, where it's like the straw that breaks the camel's back.
Sure.
Well, what can happen is if you can figure out what's really bothering you and what will make you feel better, then all of a sudden you feel relief. It's not like you're having a panic attack. It's like that if you can get to the point of being overwhelmed. And so the first step is to just lay out your problems, whatever the different things in your life are bothering you, as if they're boxes on the floor, and then put a label on them. Like it could be anything. It could be my father's temper. It could be the lack of free time. It could be any, thing. It could be, work stress. You just lay them out, put a label on them, and then look at them as if, they're boxes that you're going to try to lift, and see which one feels the heaviest to lift if you were just looking at it, or just felt the yuckiest when you look at it. That's probably the worst thing bothering you at that time. So then the second step is to say, well, how do I feel about it? And what are my emotions? What are my upset feelings like? Am I sad, or am I scared, anxious in some way about it? Do I feel some loss, disappointment, rejection, sad, grief, Do I feel anxious, overwhelmed, inadequate, apprehensive? What were the deep feelings? And it even helps if you can put it in a visual image too. Like, a person says, well, I feel just really anxious. I feel like I'm on a roller coaster being thrown around, jerked around. Or I'm feeling so depressed. I feel I'm in a deep pit, and I can't, it's all dark. I can't even see out. It's just something that gives you that real picture of what it is. So in other words, you're obviously not being afraid of your feelings. You're really going with the feeling with the intent to take it to a beautiful place, so you have to ask yourself, what's the, so once you got your picture and your emotions, under the anger too, it's very important to realize that anger is more of a superficial emotion. It's just a defense. It's like put up your dukes kind of a defense kind of emotion. It's not a real emotion. It might give you a little energy to motivate you to do something, but it's you have to go below and ask. It's kind of, I call it the iceberg analogy, where you kind of can see that most people can get in touch with their anger. The tip of the iceberg, they can see that. We can't see the depths of the iceberg. We can just see the tip. I'm angry, I'm annoyed, I'm frustrated, or I'm irate or whatever. You can see the tip of it. But then you have to say, what's below? Like I was saying, you got to think, below it is, I'm either sad or scared, and some gradation of that, some type of that. And you have to get to those deeper feelings, because the anger is, I think I mentioned this last time, anger is like taking a poison pill, expecting somebody else to die. And so you really can't do much with it. It's just going to tear you up. So you want to find out, well, what's really bothering me and what can make it better? So when you go to the deeper level and find out what it, like, are you feeling sad or scared or both? What kinds of things are going on? Then you ask yourself, well, why is this so important to me? What is the worst thing about it? What's bothering me about it? For example, say a woman went in, goes talking to her doctor. She has cancer. She's scared. And then he's talking to her, but he doesn't assume like, well, she must be afraid she's going to die. He's just listening to find out what the concerns are. And when she gets to it, the real main concern at that moment was she was afraid her hair was going to fall out from the radiation chemo. She knew it probably would. And she wasn't looking forward to what do people think, what do I look like. Well, and so then he was able to respond with, what will make it feel better? Okay, well, a lot of people love to go over to the shop. It's got all these bandanas and wigs and hats, and they love it. And then that actually made her feel better, because they got to the root of the fear, if you will, and fear of loss and so on. So that is what in chapter 2 I kind of cover and help people understand and follow the process where they can face their feelings, not defend against their feelings, not express their feelings, because venting doesn't really get you anywhere. The point when you have a feeling is to focus inward, figure out, well, what of all these things in life is bothering me, and what am I actually feeling, and why? What would be something that would, like if I could change this, if it would, and it got better, I would just feel relaxed and relieved and have a positive solution in life. Like in the case I was just mentioning about the lady that, was losing her hair, what she could do. So a lot of times we get focused on the superficial and we don't really go deep. So feelings are the guide to clarify ourselves, to go within, to clarify ourselves. That's what feelings are for, because they will give us some answers for our emotional survival. If we can figure out what's bothering us, we can figure out what we can do. And sometimes it might just be you need a nap. The worst of it is I'm exhausted and I'm tired and I need to go take a nap. You don't need to talk to anybody or do anything. You just have to follow your process of your feelings and be okay with them.
So, Anne, why does anger show up first? And you don't see the other emotions that go along with it. Why is that usually one of the easier ones to manifest or pop up?
Why do you think it is, Steve? What are your thoughts on it?
Give me a second.
Sure.
Think about that. Well, I do think it's goes back to a lot of what we said, the negativity. We dwell on the negativity, the problem, not the solution. In the example of the woman getting cancer treatment, the solution for that anger was, well, you know what? You can get a wig. There's a lot of things that we can do to support you during the treatment, and your hair will grow back after that, and it'll be all good.
Mm-hmm.
But right away, she gravitated toward anger. Is it victim mentality? You just want to play the victim many times.
Mm-hmm. Well, what do you think? I mean, do you think that?
I feel it is. And it gives you something to complain about, which we love doing. And we also sometimes don't want to take responsibility and accountability. In her situation, not so much, but she could flip it around and say, all right, this is not the greatest, but well, you know what? I can look at the positive side of things instead of the negative side of things. I do believe it does go back to what we were saying in the very beginning, that we're kind of programmed to be negative. So right away we go to the negative route instead of looking at the positive side.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. One thing about anger is that it could be a part of grief, unresolved grief or hurt, and that was not expressed.
Absolutely.
And so that the person could be stuck at that anger and not, and not doing the grief work, not getting those feelings of sadness out, because that's harder in a way. It feels better in a way to feel angry, right? You feel a little energy, like you might be, okay and in control. But underneath, you're having anger can be like grief, it can be like a boiling pot where you've got the lid on it shaking. That's the anxiety people might feel, but really it's this boiling kind of stuff. And it could include rage and sad and the whole stuff that's there. And you need it to let it out and let the grief out about things versus just get mad and try to, change something.
Yeah.
But it may be easier to
easier. I think that's it. I think that really is it, because it's easier to have that feeling of anger than it is to face the underlying reason. So let's say you're sad, you're hurt, you're grieving, could be even, anything, a relationship. That woman could have been grieving the fact that she's not healthy anymore.
Exactly. I mean, when your body's not working right, you need to grieve. It's a loss. Anything. It's not just, grief is not just related to a loss of a person or someone's passed away. It's about any loss. I mean, you can lose your, grandmother's, favorite ring, sentimental, that you had, and then that's just a loss.
Sure.
They have to grieve and cry about.
Absolutely. And again, it goes back to it's easier not to face that because it's hurtful. You don't want to go back to that. You don't want to. And then sometimes you have to face yourself because maybe there's a reason. Maybe you're responsible. Listen, I have skin cancer, been going through it for decades. All, manageable, but it's been a couple of rocky times, radiation and such. Wasn't angry about it, but I can tell you full on, my fault. Genetics plays a part. It's in my family, mother, father, aunt, onward. But it was way too much sun exposure. So I could take that route and say, I'm angry, I got to deal with this and have this again. But no, I don't look at it that way. It's like, all right, well, you know what? I should have listened to my mother back then. She didn't even know she had it. And she always used to say, stay out of the sun, use sunscreen. Nah, I'm going to be fine. Going to be fine. It's my fault. Mostly my fault. Say 75%. I could be angry. What is that going to do? It's like, just get another treatment whenever I need it. And it's all good. But sometimes it's hard to face that responsibility.
I'm so sorry that you're going through that.
Thanks. It's decades, literally decades. So it's like, and there's a new treatment I just read about last night, and it's, I'm good. I have low level, you take a look at somebody like Jimmy Buffett,
Yeah.
And that, very rare case, but not a lot has been said about his life, but because of his lifestyle, which was his music and everything he personified, it was the sun. So got to believe that probably had something to do with it at some point.
Right.
But I think he's an anomaly because his sister, I don't know if you read this, and there's a reason I don't want to take up time, but there's a reason I'm
Mm-hmm.
bringing this up.
Mm-hmm.
She was diagnosed with cancer, different type, at around the same time he was 4 years ago. And
Mm-hmm.
they kind of held each other's hand through it. But she said recently after his passing that even through all of that, the negativity, the treatment, what you know your destiny is going to be, he always smiled. He was never negative about anything. He was just that kind of person, just upbeat, positive. Uh,
Nice.
God bless. I wish we all could do that. Easier
Right.
said than done.
Absolutely.
And you could say, well, it was his lifestyle, had all the money, and all right, $1 billion. Where is he now? It didn't buy health. Maybe
Right.
it bought a year or two, like Steve Jobs, Apple. Um, I think he lived 7 years after his diagnosis, and some of it is experimental treatment, fueled by his wealth. But still, in the end, it didn't mean anything. But
Right.
two positive people.
Right. Exactly. Thank you for sharing all that because I hadn't read everything about it. So, to bring it to something that made me think of something when you were talking about that you've taken on yourself as guilt, kind of feel like, well, I'm guilty, so just live with, I got to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, there are five. The actually cancer, I think, from what I understand, like there's mind body interactions. Like in other words, sponsoring thoughts. If you're constantly worried about getting a cold or being rushed all the time,
Yes.
you get a cold. And with cancer, I think they have found an association with some loss and like prior, like a year before, and I'm not exact, that there's something to do with that emotion of grief. And so the idea of letting the grief out is a really good thing, for not holding it in other words, some people, they take their emotions and they internalize them. Stress affects their body. Some people get a mental issue or emotional issue. Some people get a physical issue because they're holding in this pain in themselves, whereas grief is releasing the pain altogether and not being in your body and not affecting you. The 5 phases of grief are: the first phase is denial, shock, numb. you know, the second phase is bargaining, and I'm changing it because I know the second phase is anger, according to Kubler-Ross, but I put it this way. The second phase is bargaining, kind of intellectual. Well, if this didn't happen, or that wouldn't happen, or I didn't do that, or they didn't do it, then it's
Sure.
almost like go away. It's not going to go away. It won't make the loss not exist by bargaining. But then the third phase, in my way I put it, is anger. But anger can be at anything. It could be at the person who passed. It could be at the doctor that didn't help. It could be at God, why God let this happen. It could be guilt. It's kind of like what you were talking about, Steve. Guilt is simply taking that anger within the grief and putting it on yourself, being angry at yourself. So it's still the third phase of grief. You're still in an aborted mourning, or they call it pathological or aborted mourning process, where you haven't gotten to just fully release the fourth phase, which is sadness, the real crying, the mourning, the loss, and keep getting that out, because that's when you actually get it out of your system. You get to the fifth phase, which is acceptance, where you do actually feel some peace, and then inner peace, and that you get to the point where the good starts coming in, and what you've learned starts coming in, and you're actually rebuilding on a solid foundation of a healed self. But
I'm sorry.
No, you go
While
back.
you're at that point,
I was responding to you. You should, you have every right to.
And I don't want to run out of time, but
No.
you made something come clear in my mind, that there's always, if there's anger, I want to say there's always some kinds of guilt or responsibility. What do I mean by that? Even when somebody passes, okay, you had nothing to do with it.
Right.
They just
Right.
passed. However, many of us internalize and there's grief. you say to yourself, I should have spent more time with them. I could have done this. I could have done that. So even with something that you're not really responsible for, you do bring it on yourself. And then that can turn into, even that situation, that can turn into manifesting anger, which, based on what you're saying, and it sounds perfectly reasonably true, that it masks all the other emotions, and you don't really get to go through the process of all of what you just said, the 5 steps or whatever. You don't get to go through that because you're just angry and you're focusing on the angry.
That's exactly right. That's what happens with so many times, is that people will stay stuck at the anger phase.
Right.
And because it feels a little better than it does to be terribly, momentarily depressed.
Sure.
Crying.
But
it's like getting that sadness out, and keep getting it out. It's what gets you to your actual peace. If you stay at the anger or the guilt, if you just putting on the guilt on yourself, but turn the anger inward, then you never get to heal. And so you keep going back and forth. So, and guilt
and for that, there's you. We're out of time, man. I don't.
Okay.
There's so much to talk about here. I can keep going with you.
Yes.
Tell me that the title of your book is.
It's Love Yourself, Love Your Life, and in my name, AP Filosa.
Gotcha. Mm-hmm. And we can find out more about the book where?
It's you can get it, actually, it's been revised, so it will be coming out to a lot of bookstores revised soon. I'm not positive, what the publisher, when it exactly be soon, within the month. And I know you can get it now just on Amazon. You can get Kindle, you can get Audible, you can get the book, and so on.
Yeah. And if somebody is going through a grieving situation, because we've seemed to have centered on that, or dealing with their feelings, how do they reach out to you on a counseling level, even therapy level, even hypnotherapy level?
Yes, I'm licensed in Virginia, and so my website is psychologistinvirginia.com. You can look me up on there. You can email me. I used to have a nonprofit, and so you can email to Love Your Life Healing Center at Outlook, or another email you could do this around the book and stuff would be afc23238@hotmail.com, an old email that I've had and still have. So
gotcha. Yeah. And great talking with you, and learned a lot. We really did peel back the layers and made it very understandable why we act a certain way. And I appreciate that. Thank you so much for being here.
Well, thank you, Stephen. Thank you for being you, and you, Sharon.
And you too. And look forward next time we get a chance to talk.
Me too. You take care.
Are you looking for even more of the podcasts and hosts that you love? The Podcast Business News Network is proud to announce that you now have even more ways to listen live. Check out the MyTuner Radio, online radio box, and Simple Radio apps on iOS and Android, or find us online. Search for Business News Network on mytuner-radio.com, or search Podcast Business News Network on streama.com and onlineradiobox.com/US. Take your podcast on the go and don't miss a minute of the action.
Broadcasting from the business capital of the world, this is the Podcast Business News Network.
For nearly 2,000 severely injured veterans, everyday life has become filled with barriers.
Day-to-day simple tasks can become pretty daunting.
I have to carry my chair up 2 flights of steps or have somebody do it for me.
What scares me the most is just the falling.
When I'm struggling with my house, I think, to have that one great barrier just knocked down, it's crucial.
Home for Our Troops is a wonderful nonprofit that builds a
mortgage-free, fully adaptive, handicap-accessible house.
And there's no catch.
It'll be our very first home that we've ever owned.
This is a game changer.
This is where your life begins again.
We need you to join us in completing this important mission. Please visit hfotusa.org and help build homes and rebuild lives.
Because of you, everything's going to be okay.